I've always loved to have personal concerts behind all my pieces, and at the time there was a lot of kind of techniques that I was using for Time for Prayer, which was released on Dixon Avenue. And I sat down on my bed in my mum and dad's house, put the headphones on, got this VST up, and like just kind of sat down and just played on the keyboard of the Mac. And I wrote the synth line in about half an hour and finished the track in about 45 minutes. It was the most honest and fun piece of music that I'd written for, like, I guess, ever, and it just all kind of came out of me. And it's just those feelings that you feel a lot of the time. You can feel like it's just all fake, but it's not. Everything that you feel, it's all real. It's only real, and that's kind of how it all came about. So. Denis Sulta here. This is the deconstruction of my track It's Only Real, made back in 2015. This was pretty much the first time that I'd used the Mac keyboard to basically create a melody and to play kind of what was going on in my head. And it's a very simple track. There's only 9 channels in the whole thing. I just kind of flicked my mindset into a little bit more of a free expressionate way of thinking, as opposed to a sit down and program type way of thinking. So it just changed it from the technical parts of Time for Prayer, which was very much based around a Max for Live tool called Mono Sequencer, which is this guy right here. When you play a sound through it, you can basically change the velocities and the pitch, the note on and the note off, and it will just run and create a very natural drum pattern. But I used this not only on the drums, but I used it on the synth, and I used it on the big stabs in Time for Prayer. So see, like, so that stabby sort of synth noise was sequenced by this sequencer, and basically that was the last thing I did before I moved on to this project. So with that mono sequencer still in the project, and me kind of thinking about how to move on from where I was beforehand, I spent quite a lot of time working on the drums. I decided to really strip it all back and just kept it quite simple, and then all of a sudden this project became alive. Kick always is in track 1 for me. 909 kick with a bit of a boost at the low end, most of the middle part taken out, and a little bit kicking it high and then compressed. And then I'll send it to its own bus. Kick will go to 1, the bass will go to 1, the high drums will go to 1, and all the rest like that. The synth and the effects will all go to their own ones. Just nice big kick. It just basically just runs throughout the track. No ghost kick, none of that stuff, just simply a kick drum. And then in track 2, we've got this, which is just a snare ran through that mono sequencer, which I was talking about before. This one here. So I've basically just been changing the octave, the octave automation on it, taking away a couple of hits here and there. Pitch stays the same except for 1, that sort of thing. But the velocity on this is what makes it really exciting. Like, when you can automate the velocity of the drums, it takes away from having to spend a lot of time actually keying it in, because keying it in takes a long time, and even though you can spend hours and hours and hours making it sound very natural, this mono sequencer kind of does it all for you at the kind of a click of a button, and you can kind of do it all that way. So it's just simply just a snare through a sequencer, a bit of EQ, and that's pretty much it basically for the drums when it comes to that thing. There's then a hi-hat pattern which is going through exactly the same routing. It's just doing something a little bit more kind of continuous, and both of these are going solidly straight. See, this project now, it goes back, I think, it goes back almost 6 years now. So now I would do things slightly differently, but the simplicity of this is that it's all going through this one bus, which is sending it a little kind of cool little trick that I learned. This simple delay here, they've changed it now in the newer version of Ableton, but this one here, basically what you can do is you can set it up a very, very small delay that's not quantized, and what that will do is it will send it like either slightly to the right or slightly to the left, depending on it. So if we change it, if we pull this one down, pull it up there, you'll hear the difference in it. Slightly, obviously too much now. But if you bring it back down to like something like there, like a 4 or 5 millisecond delay, it will just set, it makes everything just actually just kind of go in 3D. So it just pulls everything apart, but without sending stuff too wide. And if you do that to everything at the one time, then it keeps everything in the same sort of realm, but it doesn't end up sounding too sparse. In this project, I just have it set up at 4 milliseconds. But yeah, that's the two most complicated parts of the drum sequencing. The other parts of it are just a kick and an open hat. So the clap is just simply just a wee bit of kind of makeshift EQing. Just another, it's a clap that I got from some sort of sample pack along the way. Something short and sharp, and then the open hi-hat, it's the 909 again, so it's just all 909 drums pretty much. You know, listening to a lot of Detroit house and techno from Rubber, I kind of was using a lot of different like drums at the time, but I just think that the 909 always hit the hardest, and so yeah, just simply just used all the parts from that, just gave them all a little bit of compression and gave them their own space. Then it was moving on to the toms. So toms for me are a big part of how I create rhythm in the track. All the time I'll just take, I think this might be a tom, so this is the 808 tom, because the 808 toms have a really nice, like they're really nice to tune, and they're really nice to create kind of poppy rhythms, but also have some sort of musical element to it. So you can really add to that when you bring in the kind of distant parts over the top of it. But when you have the kick on its own, it just sounds, you know, it's beefy and it's big. But then when you have the toms on the top of it, it just adds a real bounce, you know. And the toms here, I cut off the low end slightly, cut them off just below 100. The main theme is done on a VST called Triple Cheese. This was what I kind of was doing when I was in the house. I was just taking a little bit of the drum loop and then playing over the top of it. You're going to hit this and go. That might sound like just absolute nonsense there. Like once you consolidate it and go into the MIDI, this is where you can kind of really foot around with it and make it something that's actually quite coherent and something that's quite beautiful, and you can really kind of mess around with it here. So the first thing I would do is just go Control-Alt, probably set it to 16, and then just quantize it. You can go in and sort of mess around with it until you find something that really fits you. You've already got something that's kind of quite ready to go there, you know. It's the remix, it's only a real remix, there you go, like that, live and direct, absolutely. Straight from the project. But as we kind of got through the melody, I just kind of took some parts of it and put it up an octave. You know, that's something that kind of, you know, is quite nice. We just go in and take some bits of it, keeping the same structure of the notes, but just changing the octave of it. And it just kind of makes it a little bit more dynamic for those big moments, you know, for sure. The only time that this actually goes back to being the simple, or at least the kind of the original theme is right actually towards the outro. It doesn't come, it actually kind of goes back to this slightly more dynamic and octave pitched version the entire way through. I just think that it's like, if you're gonna introduce something, you gotta introduce it early on. Just because I guess that's sort of like the way that you would introduce any sort of song. It's my voice, it's like me singing. So it's like, you know, when you hear like Billie Eilish, or you hear like Adele, or you hear like, you know, Amy Winehouse, or any of these big singers, they have their own voice. And I guess that this is my way of doing that. That's the goal, is it not? It's to make music that is kind of familiar, that is recognizable, and I think that that's something that I've always tried to do without making it obviously too obvious, but it has to be familiar. Now I've also used this simple delay trick again on here, and I just set it a little bit wider because something that's slightly looser, like a synth or like a voice, you can afford for it to be slightly wider because then you give it even more space. So that's kind of what I've used here. And then I've just automated the frequency on it. Sometimes I'll just actually click it and drag it as we go along, just to keep that real feel that we were talking about before. So then the high part, I've taken it down on the sends here. That's what I've done, just to try and keep it a little bit more spacey. I'll show you the sends here. So on C, I have just got like some reverb, a ping pong delay, and a bit of a compressor. And on an A, I have, yeah, so I've got the isotope and the camel crusher. The camel crusher is like, I think, you know, Camel Fat, I'm pretty sure, are named after these plugins. The Camel audio stuff, I'm not 100% sure that they're actually still around actually. I think they might have folded, but either way, the Camel crusher is still, I think, very much available, and there's not one electronic producer that I've met that doesn't use this plugin. The tube distortion on it is absolutely ridiculous. The mech on it is quite raw, it's quite rough, but like either way, it just sounds absolutely huge. And the compressors on it are fantastic, and if you like that, listen, all four parts of it are great. I use it on everything. I use it on the master, I use it on drums, I use it on all individual channels, I use it on the bus channels. It's amazing. And then I think this might have been the first time I used the isotope stuff. This is isotope alloy. It's just built to make stuff sound good quickly. So yeah, that's kind of where I got to with the synth, keeping it simple, keeping it kind of fresh, and put it through the buses here. Now, basically the other thing is when I set up the buses and send everything to the buses, I'll have it on sends only, and that's all that you'll hear basically, as opposed to it coming through the master and the sends. You just want to get everything where you want it to be. So if we put this up full, you can just mix it slightly, so then it just becomes like a little bit more malleable that way. And yeah, so then you get then the two of them together. A bit less there, and then we're laughing. And then the last thing that I used is the Tyrell. This one is the Sulta synth. Big time. I use this and I understood this. I like the layout of it. I like the sound of it. It's free. You know, it's the Rough Garden synths from this, 948s from this, but loads of things that I've used this synth with, and it's just an amazing sounding piece of kit, and I know it like the back of my hand now. That's kind of where I got that bottom part from. Just taking out the middle bit, which the kick and the toms are in, giving it a bit of sub and giving it a tiny bit of presence, and compressed it and sent it to its own bus, which is the bass bus. One of the reasons why you send everything to buses is because everything has a compressor on it and everything is sidechained to the kick bus. What this means is it just basically gives you a lot more control to sidechain stuff from there. At the end, I've sent it through a compressor, I've sent it through Camel Crusher, because the Camel Crusher is sick and it just does a little bit of tube distortion on there, and then through Ozone, which I turned off before I sent it to the mastering engineer, but I would usually go House Master Enhance Stereo Image. That is the best preset that I was using for big spacey house stuff. I was later told off about using that. Scream gave me some great advice at a party when I was a party in Glasgow was at, and it was like maybe like 4 or 5 in the morning, and I just sent him DKY, which is like the last of the 3 Sulta Selects records that I initially released, and he looked like he was in party mode, and he just kind of switched like instantly into like serious mode and just went, "House stereo image." I was like, "What?" He's like, "Yeah, enhance stereo image," and I was like, the ozone preset. He's like, "Yeah, don't use it, it fucks up the bass." And at that point I just went, "Okay, great," and he just went straight back into party mode again. And since then I've taken his advice, but it works for some stuff, it doesn't work for others. It's definitely been used and is well known by someone of such caliber as Scream himself. Yeah, that's basically the deconstruction of It's Only Real. I hope that all makes sense, and I hope that it's given you a bit of an insight into how I think about music and how I create music, and I hope it fills you with some confidence, because that's all it was ever really meant to do, really, is to fill people with confidence and to make them feel like that they can realise their potential, regardless of how naive, when I speak for myself here, it might be, how kind of, beautifully kind of like new or exciting or kind of, ignorant it might be to the kind of like all the wonders of, like a massive big studio desk, or kind of like big technical things that you might not quite understand. It's just about you and what you love to do, and making that tangible and making it resonate with people in a social situation, if that's what you want. Alright guys, well listen, thanks very much for watching, and massive thanks to DJ Mag and Point Blank Music School. That's it for now, I'll see you all very, very soon.